The air in the map room smelled less of tobacco and more of impending administrative doom. Marshal Alexander Vasilevsky, Commander-in-Chief of Soviet forces in the Far East, ran a hand. He ran a weary hand over the sprawling relief-modeled topography of Manchuria. It was May 1945. Germany had just folded like a damp napkin, granting the Soviet Union the kind of glorious victory. It was a glorious, epoch-defining victory that historians would dissect for centuries to come. But glory Vasilevsky knew was always paid for in ledger books, and the books were hemorrhaging. The ledger books for this particular operation, Stalin's grand belated revenge fantasy, were bleeding. Marshaled the reports on the redeployment of the 6th Guards Tank Army. Colonel Ivan Volkov chirped. He placed a stack of documents so thick they looked like a small cinder block onto the big desk. They arrived safely in the Mongolian People's Republic staging areas, and all divisions are accounted. Vasilevsky nodded, his expression the picture of a man who had just hidden the sun behind a stamp. Moving 750,000 men and their attendant mechanical beasts across 5,000 miles of railway was the task. It made coordinating the march on Berlin look like ordering a picnic while maintaining surprise. Vasilevsky asked if the Japanese spotted nothing, already knowing the answer, but liking reassurance. Volkov grinned, a brief flash of pride breaking through his exhaustion, asking how they could do it. We utilized every tactic you devised, and trains ran only under the darkest skies or during blizzards. The blizzards were so severe, the only witnesses were frozen marmots, and tanks were driven overland. They went by road, often 800 kilometers at a stretch, arriving coated in dust and driven by tired men. The men believed they were hallucinating from lack of sleep, and they were not riding the rails. The rails were carrying empty boxcars, designed to confuse the most diligent spy we have, concealed men. Excellent work, Colonel. A logistical marvel, Vasilevsky murmured, as he had pulled off a masterpiece. It was a masterpiece of operational deception, making the sheer scale of the buildup invisible. 40 new divisions joining 40 already present were invisible to the Kwantung Army Command and ready. The August storm was poised to strike. But the real threat was not the Japanese waiting for them. The real threat was waiting in Moscow, where Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin was reviewing reports. He was reviewing the first preliminary expenditure reports for Operation Narrative Correction. Vasilevsky pulled the cigar from his mouth and sighed dramatically, staring at the ceiling above. Colonel, tell me about the paperwork for the Special Vengeance Supplies subsection Theta 4. Volkov's smile evaporated, and his face suddenly resembled a crumpled military uniform on the floor. Subsection Theta 4. That would be the non-essential, purely performative supplies requested. They were requested personally by the Vozhd, particularly the novelty-sized "I told you so" banner. Did the novelty-sized "I told you so" banner arrive safely, Volkov? It did, Marshal, requiring 3 separate railway flatbeds due to the dimensions demanded. It is currently being stored under guard near Chita, and the silk is magnificent. But the cost, sir. Volkov trailed off, unable to quantify the moral or economic debt incurred by a single large piece. It was an excessively large piece of taunting embroidery, and Vasilevsky leaned back, rubbing temples. This entire war was merely a stage play for Stalin's ego. The humiliating defeat in 1904 to Japan, the black stain on Tsarist honor, as Stalin insisted on calling it, had to be wiped out with prejudice. Bring in the Stavka Audit Committee report. Vasilevsky commanded, steeling himself for the terror. Let us face the true terror of this campaign. A few minutes later, 2 severe-looking men arrived. Commissar Fyodor Rostov and Deputy Chief Auditor Yevgeny Zimin clicked their heels in the office. They looked like they viewed joy as a counter-revolutionary act, and Rostov placed a stack of documents. Marshal Vasilevsky. Rostov began his voice dry and unforgiving, while the logistical success is noted. We are pleased that only 5% of the deployed tanks fell off the Trans-Siberian Railway. This was due to excessive speed and camouflage netting malfunctions. But we must discuss the budget. We must discuss the budgetary irregularities under the mandates for imperial narrative rewrite. Vasilevsky forced a pleasant, entirely false smile, saying, "Naturally, Commissar, we operate under orders. We operate under the direct orders of Comrade Stalin, and certain requirements are non-negotiable. Certain requirements for, shall we say, atmospheric success are non-negotiable." Auditor Zemin repeated. Let us review the costs incurred in June, Marshal. Line item 47, Beta, 200,000 rubles. It was allocated for special red dye non-fading formula for use on captured enemy banners. Auditor Zemin adjusted his spectacles and asked why the standard state banner red did not suffice. Vasilevsky sighed. Comrade Stalin insisted that the banners of the defeated Kwantung army be overdyed. They must be overdyed with a hue that symbolized not just Soviet victory, but the eradication of shame. Standard red apparently was too bourgeois adjacent for such a spiritually cleansing operation. And line item 61 Gamma, 3 tons of special Hungarian paprika for the kitchens of the Trans-Baikal. The supply requisition stated this was required to remind the troops that the culinary decadence of the Japanese must be met with proletarian spice. A matter of morale, Auditor. Vasilevsky explained patiently, though he privately remembered yelling at a quartermaster for hours. The men marching through the Gobi Desert need robust flavor, and the Vozhd insists on robust flavor. Rostov tapped his finger sharply on the report, noting line item 92 Delta, a colossal requisition. It is for high-definition photographic film and mood lighting apparatus, the largest non-munitions. Why is the equivalent of 3 armored divisions being spent on theatrical equipment, Vasilevsky? Vasilevsky straightened his tunic. This relates to the mandated victory photograph sequence, Commissar. Comrade Stalin requires visual documentation, demonstrating 2 key points regarding the heroic scale. 1, the heroic scale of the Soviet advance across the impassable Greater Khingan mountain range. 2, that Marshal Vasilevsky, as the appointed avenger of 1904, appears optimally lit at all times. He recalled the ridiculously specific memo from Moscow, stating Marshal Vasilevsky must not look tired. He must look like a man who has not only won a colossal war, but also just finished a vigorous nap. The lighting must emphasize the Slavic jawline, and specialized lights were necessary to simulate dawn. They simulate dawn at midday in the harsh desert environment, symbolizing the new dawn of Soviet power. Auditor Zemin scribbled furiously. So to recap, we have spent 250,000 rubles on vanity. We spent on vanity lighting and expensive seasoning, while maintaining the utmost secrecy regarding it. Marshal, the logistics for the invasion are brilliant, terrifying, and historically significant. But the expenditures for the post-mortem are borderline insane. That is the definition of serving. That is the definition of serving the Vozhd. Vasilevsky stated simply, and Rostov leaned forward. Rostov lowered his voice slightly. Let's move to the most sensitive area, which is the concealment. The Japanese must remain convinced that we are completely preoccupied with post-German cleanup. But the sheer volume of rail traffic means we cannot hide the fact that the Trans-Siberian is busy. But we have hidden it, Commissar, through misdirection. Remember the directive for the Fur Brigade? Rostov frowned, asking about the one allocating massive rail resources to move 2,000 bearskins. Precisely officially, the entire Trans-Siberian corridor is dedicated to transferring winter gear. The paperwork shows a massive, frantic logistical effort, yes, but one wholly dedicated to the motherland. Who would suspect that under those piles of smelly bear hides we have the 6th Guards Tank Army. Vasilevsky felt a genuine, if fleeting, flicker of pride in the sheer audacious pettiness of this lot. It is a genius deception, Zemin conceded grudgingly. But what about the Kwantung Army border patrols? They are well drilled, and they must have noticed the increase in motorized traffic leading to areas. Vasilevsky smiled the genuine kind this time, saying, "We addressed that with simplicity, Auditor. The Japanese view the Greater Khingan Mountains as utterly impassable for mechanized units. They assume we will hit them along the traditional rail lines or the coastal approaches. We ignored it. For the past 2 months, hundreds of supply trucks have been driving directly through the roughest. They are entirely convinced that if a Japanese scout did spot them, the scout would assume they are lost." You mean they are lost? Yes, a logistical error, not a colossal invasion, as nobody expects 40 divisions to treat a mountain range. Nobody expects 40 divisions to treat a mountain range as a casual detour. The commissars looked. The plan was mad brilliant and completely tailored to exploit the arrogance of the enemy. "Very well," Marshal Rostov said, gathering his documents. "The military strategy is approved. The theatrical budget is noted. Just one final item from the Vozhd." Vasilevsky braced himself. The novelty-sized "I told you so" banner. "Sir, Comrade Stalin is concerned about the presentation. He demands that upon the capture of Mukden, the banner must be displayed on a captured Imperial. It must be illuminated by the mood lighting and accompanied by the single largest deployment. It must be the largest deployment of decorative yet non-fatal tracer rounds in Soviet history." Vasilevsky massaged the bridge of his nose. Non-fatal tracer rounds for ambiance, for maximum impact. The enemy must understand that our contempt is both colossal and visually spectacular. Weeks passed in a haze of final preparations, and the Trans-Baikal front was ready to swallow the goat. The first Far Eastern Front was positioned to strike the fortified choke points around Mutanchang. Marshal Vasilevsky was physically exhausted, having spent his last 3 nights sleeping on a cot. He was personally double-checking the fuel reserves for the 6th Guards Tank Army, the key maneuver. He had performed the impossible, mobilizing 1.5 million men and catching an army by surprise. Then the world changed in 2 terrifying bright flashes. August 6th, Hiroshima. August 9th, Nagasaki. Vasilevsky received the news of the first bomb with detached professional interest, the Americans. The Americans were finishing the job. Good, he thought. Less resistance for us. He knew Stalin cared. Stalin cared nothing for the home islands. His eyes were fixed solely on Manchuria and the land grab.
Yes, Comrade Commander.
The deadline for August 9th had been set months ago, regardless of nuclear fireworks at 4 p.m. At 4 p.m. Moscow time, on August 8th, the Soviet ambassador formally declared war to his counterpart. Vasilevsky stood by the forward command post, watching the minute hand tick past midnight in the east. It was midnight, August 9th, and the world erupted. It wasn't a skirmish. It was a tidal wave of steel. 1 million men poured over the borders. Tanks surged across the vast rolling terrain. Engineers rehearsed. They rapidly bridged the few rivers, allowing the mechanized units to bypass the thinly spread guards. The secrecy had paid off beyond all expectation. Japanese field commanders were caught mid-sleep. They believed the Soviets were weeks away from mounting an invasion, and communications dissolved. The 6th Guards Tank Army. Vasilevsky's sharpest spear plunged directly into the Greater Khingan. The Japanese, confident their position was naturally protected, had left only the barest screen. The Soviets, using every ounce of ingenuity and sheer horsepower, crushed the perceived barrier. Vasilevsky received the first real-time combat report from the Trans-Baikal front at 0600 a.m. Marshal the 6th Guards are through the Khingan Pass. They have advanced 150 kilometers in 6 hours. Minimal resistance. The Japanese are in chaos. Excellent, Vasilevsky breathed, allowing himself a momentary, glorious release of tension. He ordered them to press the advantage, because speed is everything. He watched the colored pins. The sheer size of the operation was breathtaking. 3 massive fronts, comprising over 90 divisions. They were executing a perfect pincer movement to encircle the entire Kwantung army in Manchuria. The only real holdup, strangely, was near Halar, that massive underground fortress complex in Mongolia. The radio crackled with reports of fanatical Japanese infantry, exhausted and undersupplied, charging. They were charging Soviet armor with satchel charges. Kamikaze tactics, even here in the deserts. Siege Halar do not halt the main armored thrust, for it leave them choked in their hole, ordered he. He ordered prioritizing the overall strategic goal over a stubborn pocket of resistance, the speed. The speed was unprecedented. By the end of the first 24 hours, the invasion was far ahead of schedule. It was days blurred into a single, continuous forward charge. August 10th, August 11th, and the 6th Guards. The 6th Guards had plunged into the central Manchurian plains, unstoppable due to their momentum. However, Vasilevsky's euphoria was short-lived, just as the fighting became intense around Mutanchang. A grim-faced courier arrived from Moscow with the official field audit for the first 3 days. He had expected the cost of fuel and ammunition to be astronomical. He was prepared for the expense. But he was not prepared for the true nature of the Cold War to come. Vasilevsky ripped the packet. The first page was a summary of the invasion success, written in glowing, mandatory praise. The second page was the nightmare the Commissar General of Supply had penned a short, furious note. It was an addendum at the bottom of the logistics report, handwritten in harsh black ink to Marshall. We note with immediate concern the following. Due to the unparalleled success of the advance, our troops are entering major cities, including Harbin and Mukden, far ahead of projections. This presents a critical, immediate administrative disaster, specifically the withdrawal strategy. The strategy involves mass abandonment of supply depots and a complete lack of prepared housing. The expenditure report shows that in the last 48 hours, due to total lack of official administration, the following non-military expenditures have been made. 500,000 Chinese yuan for unauthorized comfort. 18,000 liters of confiscated sake recorded under diplomatic necessity, and 4,000 pairs of kimonos. They were seized under the heading Essential Uniform Adjustments for the Harsh Siberian Winter. And most crucially, marshal the entire emergency gold reserve set aside for post-war stabilization. It has been spent on hastily procuring administrative supplies to manage unforeseen public disorder. Chongjin Vasilevsky whispered the amphibious assault on the Korean city of Chongjin occurred. He flipped to the third page, which contained a detailed, color-coded map showing the estimated zones. The entire map was crimson. Volkov rushed over, peering nervously at the document. Marshal, what is it?
Fuel.
Did we run out of fuel?
What do you mean we are out
Vasilevsky
of fuel?
looked up, his eyes wide with
Stalin
horror,
will have us all
the map of zones quivering. He had managed to move 1 million men across a continent in secrecy, crush a major imperial army. He did it in days and avenge a 40-year-old grudge for a dictator driven by spite that he could manage. But the sheer scale of the post-war paperwork, no Volkov Vasilevsky said, his voice laced with dread. We have not run out of fuel. We have run out of accountants. The invasion is a logistical masterpiece. The administrative aftermath, the looting, the property seizure, the unauthorized deployment of silk. It is going to require the largest deployment of auditors in the history of the Soviet Union. He pointed a shaking finger at the bottom of the report, where a final, terrifying line item was. It was the projected post-victory administrative expense for unparalleled influence in Asia estimate. It was 17 billion rubles, Volkov Vasilevsky stated, folding the report. Precisely. Stalin wanted revenge. He has it now. We face the truly final, forgotten battle of the war. So Vasilevsky stared out the window. The sun was rising over the newly conquered plains. The tax returns. Colonel, we have achieved influence. Unparalleled influence demands unparalleled bureaucratic accountability. Prepare the new expense report. Prepare the new expense report, because I think we are going to need much more paprika.